Okay, so have you ever had like that feeling where it's like your brain is a web browser with like way too many tabs open? Like you're trying to focus on like one thing, but you've got like notifications and stuff popping up and like your mind wanders to like the grocery list. And then before you know it, you've like been scrolling on Instagram or TikTok for like the last 10 minutes without even like really meaning to.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think for a lot of us, that feeling of like being able to like really lock in and like concentrate super deeply can seem like a real distant memory, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, the sheer volume of information and just the constant demands on our attention these days has definitely like changed the game.
Yeah, for sure. And in this deep dive, we're going to explore like this fascinating idea that might just be like the key to reclaiming that like lost focus that we're talking about.
Okay.
So we've been like really digging into this book by Chris Bailey called Hyperfocus, and it's got like a ton of like really compelling insights into how we can like not only regain our ability to concentrate, but also like unlock some unexpected boosts in our productivity and even like our creativity.
Yeah, consider this like our focused exploration into the world of hyperfocus.
I like that.
The goal isn't just to give you like a book report or something, but to actually like pull out the core principles and give you like concrete, actionable techniques that you can like start using right away to really like sharpen your focus and experience more of those like aha moments that we all crave, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And the potential benefits sound pretty incredible,
Yeah.
right? Like the book talks about how like really mastering hyperfocus can lead to like a significant like jump in your productivity.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine like work feeling less like a constant struggle against distraction and more like a truly like engaging activity.
Right.
And the payoff is like you get more done and you get it done well in like less time.
That's the exciting prospect, right? Like
Yeah,
that hyper focus kind of puts forward. And Bailey actually lays out like a pretty structured approach to like how to achieve it. He describes like
take that.
these 4 key stages that we go through when we like enter and maintain that state of like deep concentration.
So what are those stages?
Well, he says it starts with like intentionally choosing a single meaningful object for your attention.
Okay.
Then comes like this crucial step of like clearing the decks of distractions, like both the obvious ones in our environment and then those kind of sneaky internal interruptions from our own thoughts.
Yeah.
The third stage is actually directing and maintaining that focused attention.
Okay.
And then finally learning how to like consciously bring your mind back to your chosen object whenever it inevitably starts to wander.
Yeah, I feel like that's the biggest hurdle
Yeah.
for me at least is like my mind is just going a mile a minute all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like so hard to just bring it back to like the thing I'm supposed to be working on.
Right.
So, okay, it sounds straightforward, but like you said, like we all know the real challenge is like in the execution.
Absolutely.
So let's actually dive into like why focus can feel so elusive in the first place. And like,
Yeah.
let's actually look at how limited our attentional resources actually are.
Okay, so this is where I think some like really eye-opening research comes into play. This psychologist, Timothy Wilson, has estimated that our brains are actually bombarded with around 11 million bits of sensory information every single second.
Wow.
Think of those bits as like all the sights, sounds, smells, and just other stimuli that are constantly like vying for our attention.
Right.
Now, here's the astonishing part. We can only consciously process about 40 of those bits at any given moment.
40 out of 11 million.
40, it really highlights this like massive bottleneck in our cognitive processing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even stop there. Our short-term memory, which is where we like actively hold and manipulate information, has a surprisingly small capacity too. Typically around 7 items, maybe a couple more if you're lucky.
11 million down to 40.
Mm.
That really paints a picture of just how much our brains are constantly filtering out. It's like
Uh-huh.
trying to drink from a fire hose using a tiny eyedropper.
Exactly. Bailey actually uses this idea of like attentional space. Picture it as this like really limited mental arena where your focus can reside at any one time. And given just how small that space is, it becomes really clear why we need to be so deliberate about what we actually allow to occupy it. You know, you mentioned earlier being in a meeting and your thoughts drifting to what you might have for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a perfect illustration of an irrelevant thought, like pushing its way into that very limited and valuable attentional space.
It's so relatable, though, and I think the book does a great job of pointing out how often we like operate on autopilot, right? Like we just let our minds flit from one thing to the next without any real conscious direction.
Yeah.
And we get so caught up in the stream of our own thoughts that we rarely take a moment to just like observe where our attention has actually gone.
That's precisely where this concept of like meta-awareness comes in.
Okay.
It's the ability to take a step back from your thoughts and actually become aware of like what you're thinking about. Think of it like being like this detached observer of your own mental landscape. So in that meeting scenario, meta-awareness is what allows you to notice, hey, I'm thinking about that sandwich instead of like what my colleague is actually presenting.
Right.
And then consciously choose to redirect your focus back to what's actually being said.
So it's not just about like sheer willpower to focus harder. It's about like cultivating this almost like internal radar
Yeah,
that alerts us when our focus is drifted in the first place.
exactly. And this awareness needs to be coupled with like what Bailey calls intentional focus.
Hey.
Actively and consciously deciding where you want your attention to be at any given moment. Whether you're trying to really listen and engage in a conversation or deeply concentrate on a work project, or even just like trying to immerse yourself in a good book without your mind racing, having that clear intention is like the crucial first step.
Okay, so we're understanding that our attention is like this finite resource, and we need to develop this meta-awareness to like track where it's going and then intentionally direct it.
Yeah.
But how do we actually build that like observer muscle in our minds? Like the book offers a pretty simple yet powerful technique, doesn't it?
It does. Bailey suggests setting an alarm to go off every hour.
Okay.
And when you hear it, just pause for a moment and ask yourself a couple of key questions. What was occupying my attentional space just now? And was that actually in line with what I intended to be focusing on? This regular self-check acts like this mental nudge, prompting you to actually develop that meta-awareness over time.
Right.
It's like doing reps at the gym, but for your attentional control.
Right.
And gradually, this kind of like self-monitoring can become more automatic, just like a habitual way of checking in with your focus. And that's like a really significant step towards being able to enter that hyper-focus state more deliberately.
I can definitely see how that regular check-in could make a difference. It's like a little like reset button for your focus throughout the day.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're becoming more aware of our attention. We're actively trying to direct it. What's like the next major obstacle we need to tackle to achieve hyperfocus?
Without a doubt, it's distractions.
Okay.
And the book makes a really important point here. Instead of constantly battling distractions as they arise, the more effective long-term strategy is to actually proactively engineer your environment to minimize them in the first place.
That makes so much sense. It's like setting the stage for focused work rather than relying solely on our often flaky willpower to resist temptations.
Exactly.
So what kind of environmental distractions are we primarily talking about?
Well, think about your immediate physical workspace.
Okay.
Is your phone within easy reach constantly buzzing or lighting up? Is there a lot of visual clutter around you? What about background noise?
Right.
But environment also extends to our digital surroundings, which are often like the major culprits these days.
Oh, for sure.
For example, if your web browser automatically opens to a social media feed, that's essentially a constant invitation to get sidetracked. Bailey suggests implementing simple fixes, like using website blockers to temporarily prevent access to those tempting sites.
Oh, that's
Or even changing your browser's homepage to something much less stimulating, like a blank page or just like a simple search engine.
That's so smart.
And the same principle applies to your phone. If it's a persistent source of distraction, consider putting it on silent and just placing it in another room while you're trying to concentrate deeply.
I mean, for some of us, the thought of being completely cut off can feel a little anxiety-inducing, you know?
I know what you mean.
We have this like ingrained fear of missing out, or like, what if something important happens?
And the book acknowledges that it's not realistic or necessary for everyone to go completely off-grid for extended periods.
Right.
That's where strategic approaches like putting your phone on airplane mode for like those focused work sessions,
Okay.
and then checking for messages or notifications at like deliberately scheduled intervals can be really effective. You're still reachable, but you're taking control of when you engage with those potential interruptions, rather than being constantly reactive to every buzz and ping.
Yeah.
The same logic applies to email. Instead of having your inbox constantly open and feeling compelled to respond immediately to every message that comes in, set aside like specific blocks of time throughout the day to check and respond to emails in batches.
So it's all about creating those like intentional boundaries around our attentional space.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, now what about those internal distractions? You know, when you're in like a quiet, distraction-free environment, but your own mind just starts to take off on like tangents, thinking about like everything except the task at hand.
Those internal distractions, I think, can often be the most challenging to manage.
Oh, for sure.
Bailey offers a really practical and surprisingly effective technique for dealing with those wandering thoughts. When you notice your mind drifting, take a brief pause in your work and actually physically jot down whatever is currently occupying your thoughts. It could be a to-do list item that suddenly popped into your head, or a random creative idea that surfaced, or even just a worry or a concern.
Right.
But the simple act of writing it down helps to externalize that thought, to get it out of your mental loop and really free up that valuable attentional space so you can then consciously return to your intended focus. It's like giving those distracting thoughts like a temporary parking spot so they're not constantly vying for your attention in the background.
Yeah, that sounds like a really useful technique.
Yeah.
It's almost like acknowledging the thought without letting it completely derail your focus.
Right.
Okay, so we've spent some time understanding hyperfocus and how to cultivate it, but the book also introduces this other equally important concept,
Yeah.
scatterfocus.
Yeah.
Can you shed some light on what that entails?
Absolutely. Bailey makes a compelling argument that while hyperfocus is an incredibly powerful tool for deep work and task completion, it's not the only cognitive mode that we should be engaging. He introduces scatterfocus as this vital and complementary state of mind, particularly when it comes to planning, fostering creativity, and just generating innovative ideas.
So it's almost like hyperfocus is when we're operating with a laser beam of attention on a specific point, whereas scatterfocus is more like letting our minds cast a wider net, often with a future-oriented or problem-solving perspective.
Precisely. In fact, research highlighted in the book indicates that when our minds wander, which is something we often view pretty negatively, they're actually dwelling on future possibilities and potential scenarios nearly half the time, around 48%.
Wow.
This inherent future orientation of scatterfocus is actually what makes it such a valuable state for formulating plans, brainstorming, and just thinking outside the box.
That's fascinating. I think a lot of us have been conditioned to view mind wandering as inherently unproductive.
Yeah.
Something to be suppressed.
Yeah.
Especially when we're trying to be efficient.
And that's a natural association because true hyperfocus and a completely undirected wandering mind, they can't really coexist.
Right. However, Bailey actually reframes daydreaming and mind wandering as being closely related to this more constructive state of scatterfocus, this more diffuse and associative type of thinking.
Okay.
And to help us understand and harness it better, he breaks scatterfocus down into 3 primary modes.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these modes.
The first is what Bailey calls capture mode.
Okay.
This is essentially a process of regularly taking inventory of everything that's currently occupying your mental bandwidth.
Okay.
He suggests dedicating time, maybe once or twice a week, to simply sit down with a pen and paper or a digital note-taking tool and just write down everything that comes to mind.
Okay.
This could include unfinished tasks, household chores, you've been meaning to tackle unanswered emails or messages, nagging worries, anything that's taking up mental real estate.
Right.
And the act of capturing these things helps to close those open mental loops and free your mind to wander more effectively later. Think of it as decluttering your mental inbox.
That sounds a lot like a brain dump, just getting everything out there. Exactly. It's a way to externalize those persistent thoughts and reduce their disruptive power.
Okay.
The second type is problem crunching mode.
Okay.
This one's fairly self-explanatory. You intentionally bring a specific problem, challenge, or issue into your conscious awareness,
Okay.
and then allow your thoughts to kind of orbit it, exploring different angles, considering potential solutions, brainstorming your ideas without necessarily trying to force a linear step-by-step approach.
Okay.
It's a more relaxed and exploratory form of mental engagement.
So instead of trying to solve it methodically, you're almost letting your mind play around with the problem a little bit.
Precisely. You're creating the mental space for those unexpected connections to form.
Okay.
And then the third type is habitual mode.
Okay.
This comes into play when you're engaged in simple, repetitive tasks that don't demand your full cognitive attention. Things like washing the dishes, going for a leisurely walk, knitting, or even taking a shower. These types of activities engage just enough of your brain to prevent it from being completely idle, but they still leave ample room for your mind to wander naturally, to reflect, and for those unexpected thoughts and ideas to kind of bubble to the surface. If you've ever found yourself suddenly having a creative insight or mulling over a solution to a problem while doing something completely unrelated and kind of mindless,
Yes.
that's habitual scatterfocus in action.
I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
Some of my most creative ideas seem to strike when I'm doing something completely mundane and not actively trying to think of them.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so this seemingly random flow of thoughts we experience during these more relaxed moments, is that linked to a specific network in the brain?
It is Bailey discusses the brain's default mode network, or the default network for short.
Okay.
This is a network of interconnected brain regions that becomes more active when our minds aren't focused on any particular external task. That seemingly random stream of thoughts that you might experience while meditating or trying to fall asleep, or simply just daydreaming.
Yeah.
That's often the default network at work. And while these thoughts can sometimes feel like a distraction when you're trying to concentrate, they can actually be this fertile ground for novel ideas and creative breakthroughs by allowing your brain to make those unexpected associations between different pieces of information.
So it's like the brain's background processing system constantly working on connecting different pieces of information in the background when we're not consciously directing it.
Precisely. And one of the key reasons why scatterfocus can lead to these sudden aha moments is because of something known as the Zeigarnik effect.
Okay.
This psychological phenomenon basically describes our brain's natural tendency to continue processing unfinished tasks in the background even when we're not actively thinking about them.
Interesting.
We have this inherent cognitive drive towards completion. So even when you're consciously shifting your attention away from a problem, your mind might still be subconsciously working on it in the background.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
And the book uses the classic story of Archimedes in the bathtub as like the perfect illustration of this, right?
Exactly. He had been intensely grappling with this problem of how to measure the volume of irregularly shaped objects for quite some time without finding a solution. And then, while simply taking a bath and noticing the water level rise as he submerged himself, the answer just suddenly clicked into place. Thanks to the Zeigarnik effect, the problem had likely been simmering in his mind beneath the surface.
Right.
And that new sensory input from the bath provided that crucial missing link that led to his breakthrough.
So it wasn't just like a random stroke of genius in the tub. His brain had been actively working on the problem unconsciously.
Exactly.
So how can we intentionally leverage this Zeigarnik effect in our own lives? Like, we can't all just spend our days in bathtubs waiting for inspiration to strike.
Well, Bailey offers like a more practical and accessible approach.
Right.
He suggests making it a habit to write down any significant problems or challenges you're actively trying to solve.
Okay.
And then regularly reviewing that list, even just quickly glancing over the list, helps to keep those problems active in your subconscious mind.
Okay.
Increasing the likelihood that new information experiences or even just like random thoughts might trigger a connection and lead to a potential solution.
So it's about keeping those mental gears turning in the background.
Precisely.
Okay, so we're allowing our minds to wander. We're consciously keeping those problems simmering in the back of our minds.
Yeah.
But the book also makes this strong case that the quality of our scatter focus, like the kind of connections our brain can make, is really dependent on the quality of the information that we're feeding it right.
Absolutely.
It's like you can't expect to connect insightful dots if you haven't collected any good dots in the first place.
That's a crucial insight. While our brains possess this like incredible, almost limitless capacity for storing information, the process of actually forming meaningful memories and knowledge requires attention, which, as we've already discussed, is a finite and precious resource.
Yeah.
Therefore, if we want to actually nourish our minds and fuel those creative insights that arise during scatterfocus, we need to be highly selective and intentional about the types of media and information we consume.
So it's not just about like passively absorbing whatever happens across our path. We need to be more deliberate about what we're inputting into our brains.
Absolutely. Bailey suggests consciously choosing to delve deeper into subjects and areas that genuinely pique your curiosity and interest.
Okay.
For instance, if you're an architect, spending time studying the work, philosophies, and lives of like influential historical architects makes a lot of sense. It helps to build like this rich and interconnected network of related information in your mind.
Right.
However, he also cautions against becoming too narrowly focused.
Okay.
Often the real power of scatterfocus comes from the ability to make those unexpected connections between seemingly disparate pieces of information from diverse fields.
So it's this delicate balance between developing deep expertise in our areas of interest and also cultivating a broader exposure to a wide range of different ideas and perspectives.
Exactly.
So what are some concrete examples of these high-quality informational inputs versus the less valuable ones?
Well, the book points to activities like reading well-researched biographies, enrolling in online courses that delve into specific subjects, engaging with thoughtful documentaries, or listening to in-depth podcasts like this one, perhaps.
Well, of course.
These tend to offer more intellectual substance and nuanced information. On the other end of the spectrum, activities like endless passive scrolling through social media feeds or mindlessly binge-watching low-quality television are less likely to provide the kind of rich, stimulating information that fuels creative thinking and those insightful connections during scatterfocus.
It's almost like we should approach every media option as a bid for our attention.
Yeah.
And we need to consciously evaluate whether that bid offers like real intellectual value and has the potential to enrich our minds for that crucial period of scatterfocus.
Exactly. Just as we make conscious choices about the food we consume for our physical health and well-being,
Right.
we should be equally mindful and discerning about the information we consume for our mental and creative health.
Okay, let's try to like synthesize everything we've covered.
Yeah.
What are the key actionable takeaways from this deep dive into the concepts of hyperfocus and scatterfocus?
The two fundamental ideas are learning to effectively utilize hyperfocus for that sustained deep attention on our important tasks,
Right.
and then understanding and intentionally engaging in scatterfocus to foster creative problem solving and the generation of new ideas. For hyperfocus, the key elements involve proactively eliminating distractions from our environment, cultivating meta-awareness to monitor where our attention is actually directed and consciously redirecting our focus when our minds inevitably begin to wander. For scatterfocus, it's about intentionally creating those opportunities for our minds to wander freely, actively seeking to make novel connections between different pieces of information, consciously nourishing our minds with high quality and diverse inputs, and giving ourselves sufficient unstructured time for reflection and mental exploration.
And there was also a very specific piece of actionable advice from the book, wasn't there? Something about a certain widely enjoyed caffeinated beverage.
Yes. Bailey specifically mentions the potential benefits of having a cup of coffee to aid in achieving hyperfocus. He actually highlights scientific evidence that shows that caffeine can improve alertness, enhance focus, and even boost performance on various cognitive tasks. So the next time you need that extra edge to really lock in and concentrate deeply, a cup of coffee might actually be a scientifically supported strategy to consider.
Well, that's certainly welcome news for coffee enthusiasts.
Okay.
Okay, so we've covered like a significant amount of ground in our discussion today, from understanding the inherent limitations of our attention to exploring the surprising and often overlooked benefits of allowing our minds to wander.
We certainly have, and our hope is that you, our listener, are now considering how you might more intentionally integrate both the focus power of hyperfocus and the creative potential of scatterfocus into your daily life to enhance both your productivity and your innovative thinking.
Absolutely. And if this deep dive has sparked your interest, we highly recommend checking out Chris Bailey's full book, Hyperfocus, for like an even more comprehensive exploration of these techniques and strategies.
It's a truly valuable resource for anyone who is looking to take greater control of their attention and really unlock their full cognitive potential.
So we'll leave you with one final thought to ponder now that you have a better understanding of both like the incredible power of focused attention and the often untapped potential of like a wandering mind. What unexpected and innovative connections might you begin to make?